Okay, how's everybody doing? So I'm Glenn Gould. I'm an actor, writer, director, producer. I'm going to be the moderator for today's discussion, which could be pretty interesting. And I'm just going to start here by, let's go down the line and just introduce ourselves. So I'm Glenn Gould. I'm Mi'kmaq from Nova Scotia originally. I reside in North Bay, Ontario, and I was in Bones of Crows, the film that showed yesterday afternoon by Marie Clements, who was supposed to be here for this panel, but unfortunately had some schedule changes. So we have someone else in their place. So we'll just go down the line. Let's introduce ourselves right quick before we start chatting about this stuff.
Hello, I'm Lenin Sivam. I'm a writer, director, and producer. I have 4 features. My last feature called The Protector. It's going to be playing tonight at 9:30, Silver City. That's about it.
My name is Kyle Schmallenberg. I'm a writer, producer, director as well. We have a production company together called Rap Productions, and one of our short films was at the festival playing yesterday called Braided Together. And I'm from Toronto.
And I am Laura Friedman. I'm originally from Colombia, living in Toronto with Kyle, who's also my husband. And yeah, we worked on this film together, and we have a bunch of initiatives. Yeah. Oh, and I'm also a producer and director.
Okay. All right. So now that we know who everybody is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out by reading a little blurb to you guys that was sent to me about the discussion today. It's on authentic narratives. So we understand authentic storytelling as sharing lived experiences in a way that is genuine and honest, especially for those being represented. It happens when representation resonates as being true and respectful, showing the nuances and realities of those who hold these identities in day-to-day life, whether through true or fictional stories. Authentic storytelling is for everyone. It is especially important for underrepresented people and groups whose stories are often told or shaped by and for the dominant culture or lens, which can result in harmful stereotypes, false narratives, erasure, and dehumanization. So that's going to be our discussion today, which could be quite interesting. And you know, like, okay, we're going to dive right in. I'm going to just send these questions down the line, okay? No messing around here. All right? So what does authentic storytelling mean to you as a content creator, and what are some examples?
That's a big question. So I came from Sri Lanka, and I'm Tamil. And then we have this huge Bollywood there in India, and then always the Sri Lankan Tamils have a stereotype representation. So it's always been I always resent growing up, and for me it's very dear and hard where our authenticity and identity, it's always portrayed in completely different sense. And then when I came to America, all the brown people are based out of Apu, The Simpsons Apu, and it's been a struggle, and it's part of the reason I got into filmmaking, because I want the world to know who I am and what I am, and then it's our individuality makes who we are like human beings, and then. For the past 10 years, there has been a tremendous improvement, and there's consciously people are trying to go out of their way to knock down all this stereotyping and all that. So it's going in a very positive, progressive way, and we have a long way to go still.
So more less of the Bollywood stereotype happening, and more of dramatic films that are telling true stories.
Yeah, exactly.
Of life. Mm-hmm. What people are experiencing out there, and how just real life experiences. Yeah, that's interesting. Being a First Nations actor and someone who works in film, I totally can relate with that. So
Yeah, it's good that it's been recognized as a huge problem right now, and it's one of the foremost issue that's on the surface right now, right? So, which is very good.
All right, down the line. What does authentic storytelling mean to you, Mr. Biggie Smalls, as a content creator? I met him last night as Biggie Smalls, so I had to ask somebody what his real name was today. What does authentic storytelling mean to you as a content creator, and what are some examples?
Yeah, like he said, it's a big question. I think there's a lot of layers, because to be able to tell an authentic story, it has to do with perhaps the topic of the story, right? That's a layer. It has to do with the approach to making it and with whom you're making it. That's another layer. And then it also has to do with how you, the creator, is seeing these things. Because I think, we often talk about like this certain kind of person makes the story that's about this kind of person, right? Therefore, that's authenticity. And that's true in a sense, but I don't think that that's inherently true, because how many of us are also inauthentic within ourselves, right? So there is also that element of like inward looking. How am I being authentic? Therefore, like, starting from that place, and then if I'm being authentic within myself, I can accomplish an authentic story, right? It's very complicated. Because also, like, I don't happen to think that you have to just be from one kind of community to tell that community's story. But there are requirements if you're not from a community trying to tell that story in an authentic way, and it absolutely means that collaboration has to be part of it, right? Open dialogue, honesty, and trust, right? I'm also a psychotherapist, so I talk about honesty, authenticity, you know what I mean?
I feel better, actually, just in the last 2 minutes about myself. Thanks, man. Free therapy, yeah.
I'm trying to think of what would be a good example. I'm hesitant to say anything in particular, because nowadays you make a reference to something good and then 2 minutes later that person's found out to be so-and-so, and it's not a good example anymore. But I think we can all, things come to mind that are not good examples of authenticity, where certain key perspectives about the story are not being consulted, about how it looks, how it sounds, even throughout the process of like how do we distribute it? How do we use this to feed back into the community that we were engaging with when we filmed? How do we not have an extractive perspective and just show up, say, we're doing you a favor, you're in it, great, and then dip, right? So.
All right, let's go down the line. What does authentic storytelling mean to you as a content creator, and what are some examples?
So I guess I'll start from a very similar to what you shared, being from Colombia and being portrayed, Colombians many times being portrayed somehow as Mexicans, and all of them being drug cartel people, which is not true. So I've, on a personal level, that's always really ignited a fire within me to say, we're not all South Americans are Mexicans. And I think it comes to the, not only what is in front of the screen, like who do you cast, and not just making rush decisions where you're not trying to be diligent and thoughtful about who you're casting. So if, I mean, that's my personal experience with Colombians, but even here what I see is you can't just box everyone and say the Asians, the South Asians, the Latinos. Like, it really takes, I think, it at the level of leadership within, like, who are the producers, who are the funders, who are the people who are casting, to be really truthful and honest and look beyond just the business and the numbers and all the glam and all of that, and to say, okay, who are the people, who is this about? So for me, my experience in authentic storytelling, we embed in our films that we do, we have processes where we try to really ensure that we are doing things properly, due diligence, consulting, we do a lot of community-based filmmaking, and as Kyle said, not only coming in and filming, but also distributing and screening within the communities that we work. But I think a lot of it, just in different initiatives that I've been involved in, it's also about giving accessibility and opening access, for example, to BIPOC creatives, which is kind of my niche, to making sure that you are giving access to people who have been marginalized for many years. And obviously in the last 2 years with the murder of George Floyd, that really became a very apparent thing. It doesn't mean it didn't exist before, but it just kind of, it was in our faces, and then all of that happened. So in the last 2 years, in authentic storytelling, for me, it's been about giving access to the unheard voices, but true access, not just a thing on paper, like true mentorship, true accompaniment from beginning to end. And if we don't give these people who don't get to necessarily tell their stories all the time access through training, through mentorship, through film festivals, through grants, then you're not going to get these authentic stories, because then you have the gatekeepers who are the ones who are always telling the stories, telling the same stories, and missing on these true lived experiences of people.
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, especially in the last few years, there's been, I think, more due diligence done when it comes to storytelling through media, and casting is another big one, especially like in my community, in the First Nations acting community. It's a huge thing. Now, you know, for authentic storytelling, I mean, I could give an example, which is Bones of Crows, the film that I was in. There was some authentic, really true storytelling going on there, because Marie Clements, the filmmaker, writer, producer, director, the brainchild behind it, genius writer, she drew upon personal experiences from her family. So family members that went to residential school who had stories, family members who were affected from residential school, and, you know, were maybe that young man that hung himself in the film, you know, years later because of what he went through, and being sexual abuser, you know, like we all have those. I have people like that in my family, and a lot of ugly cycles began. So authentic storytelling, there's a prime example right there of an authentic narrative in a film or program. Here's a story told by a First Nations filmmaker. All of the cast that she cast, she made sure that she knew everybody was actually Native, because that was another issue that has come up in the last few years, you know, and the topic of pretendians, they're calling them, right, you know. And so, like, I see it as a performer getting better when it comes to that kind of storytelling, telling authentic stories and being true and honest and getting the proper people involved. Like Outlander, for instance. I had to give them my status card. I had to prove that I was actually a First Nations person, not self-identifying. Anybody can self-identify, which happened here in the last couple of years in Canada, and it was a big uproar in the media. You know, I'm not gonna mention any names but we all know that this was something that came up whether it's from the creative side or performer side. Now they're keeping a close eye on who they're casting in roles, you know, making sure. So, you know, another example was, and I told you guys this story earlier, or last night I think, was I recently worked on a project, and it was a period piece, and I came in because the actor who was playing the role had got COVID. So I had, you know, 4 or 5 days notice, and I get there, and of course I'm in my buckskins, and they darkened me up, and I shaved off my goatee, which is like I've had since I was 5 years old. And you know, I get there and I put my fake braids in and everything like that, and I look at my script and I have 3 lines in English. Okay, no problem. I got those down easy. So I show up on set and I walk up to the teepees, and the horses are there and everything, and okay, Glenn, the director comes up and says, you have some dialogue here in this scene, right? And I said, yeah, there's three lines there in English, right? No, they're in the language. Are you serious? Like, what language? And he says, oh, didn't nobody give you the lines? And I said, no. Oh, he says, so he brings an iPad over and he shows it to me, and it's, oh my God, I'm looking at it, and it's all Sioux. I'm Mi'kmaq, I don't speak Sioux. And I said to him, are you effing serious? You expect me to learn that in 2 minutes? Do you think we all speak one language? That's ridiculous. There's no way I'm gonna be able to memorize this. But there's somebody who didn't do their due diligence, right? And make sure that they had the language coach there, they had the language there, but they failed to give it to the actor who was playing the role and assumed that, I could just learn it on the spot. They did the same thing that morning to another actor from South Dakota who is Sioux but doesn't speak his language, and he lost it. And it was, so we're like, okay, so in the end he says, well, can you say something in your own language? Or move your lips to make it look like you're saying something? So in the end, I just said, I banged off a line I remembered from 20 years ago from a movie I did where I spoke Sioux, and I was like, and I give this eagle feather to an elder, and he puts it in the young man's hair, and it's his first eagle feather. What I was actually saying were, but these are the white men who hurt your daughter. And the director was native. He was a native director, but someone who was raised in LA had no idea of anything about his culture, and it seemed like he really didn't care about how the story was being told or the authenticity of it. It just slipped through the cracks, and so there is a bit of work to do. And yeah, go ahead.
I just want to add that I think we need to become, especially those who are producers and kind of above the line, we need to be comfortable with moving at a slow pace. I feel like we have to just normalize long-term thinking, sustainability, and just moving slow. And what I mean by slow is, for example, in our short film, it's just a 15-minute film. But in the mentorship program that we launched alongside the film called the Creative Sovereignty Lab, we set aside, so we had 3 days to shoot, but we set aside a couple days before the shoot and then after the shoot, where we as cast and crew spent time, and this was in the community in Thunder Bay with a lot of indigenous folks there, and we just really, we named it. We said, like, we need to take the time to get to know each other on set, to understand how we want to be in relationship with each other. We have to. We had an elder come in. We wanted to be authentic to the story of the friends in Thunder Bay in the way that they wanted to make the film, and these things take time. And so I think I always call out the people who are making the decisions to be okay with saying, it's okay if this is going to take a little bit longer, but we better do it right and honor all of the aspects of the film, from language to location to even the culture on set, the way we're doing things. And so it's just something I'm exploring.
Yeah, because if you don't do that, it could come back and bite you later, Another, I'll go into these questions again, but I just want to give another example of something that I experienced recently, is I got pulled into a documentary, and it was from an individual from Ireland, and he says, I got an idea to do this documentary. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's about suicide. Oh, wow, okay. Yeah, I want to do it focusing on 2 Native communities in Nova Scotia. Member 2 in Eskasoni. Okay, well, I'm from Member 2. But I don't get it. I've been calling and leaving messages and blah, 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 blah. Nobody's getting back to me, and I don't understand it. I left messages for the chief. I left messages, and I said, no offense, man, but it's probably because you're a white guy who nobody knows. You have no connection to the community at all. And you're coming in trying to get people to open up and talk about suicide? You need somebody like me to come on board as a producer and to go in and do the interviews myself. In the end, he wanted to steal everything and take those stories of my family members, I call them, because our communities are small, we're an extended community. And he wanted to take those, not to know what he wanted to do with them. In the end, my co-producer, another co-producer, and I from Canada, a Métis producer, we took ownership of it in the end and said, no, we cannot let these stories go. We consulted with a legal advisor and from my community and said, no, we can protect these stories because these are sacred. And that's the other thing too, is there's the sacred side to our stories as well as being, filmmakers from underrepresented races or whatever, backgrounds. That's another thing, is the sacredness of our stories too need to be protected and respected, So anyway, I could go. I'll go on and on, but I'll start getting mad and angry and whatever. So we'll move on.
Can I follow up on this point though? Because what you're saying, I think there's also an aspect of like, what is the intention when you're making something? What is your intention for that product? What is there? And that's important to think about, because you could have a beautiful on-set culture, you could have a beautiful shoot, everybody could leave feeling really good, and if the person who owns that material decides to use it for something different, right, then the authentic atmosphere that you had evaporates, right, because now you're over here with it. And this again goes back to like intention and truthfulness, right? Like what are we actually doing? And if you tell the truth and you have a purpose and everybody thinks their stories are important, right? Therefore, everybody has some, your belief that your story is important. I have no reason to argue with that, right? Maybe it's not important to me, but it's important to you. It's true for you, right? But what is that intention? Yeah,
that's it. So interesting. I knew this was going to be an interesting conversation. What are ways in which you went about trying to make your film authentic? I think you touched on it a little bit earlier, but let's go a little deeper into that.
Yeah, for me, the first two movies that I took, it's in 1999 and Gun and a Ring. They are about Tamil community in Toronto, and then the first movie is about Tamil gang issue that we had, that I grew up with, so it's like seeing back of my hand. It's like second nature to me, and it was there. I was being brutally honest with the film, and then Vancouver International Film Festival called it True Inside of You and an eye-opener. And the second one also similar to what happened back home, how I got my name Lenin, the civil war that's happening. So, and then third film is about a transgender young woman coming out of the Toronto Tamil community. And it's based out of a very popular writer's short story. And then people was telling, like, Lenin, you're in a position, you have to take this movie. And I was also very passionate about, because we were like about 5 million of us, and then we didn't have any open transgender people in our community because it's something to do with the tradition and the culture and all that. And then I thought it's important that we speak out, and then this short story has this much response within the community. Why not take it into a film? So me and the author, who spent 2 weeks or 3 weeks with the trans people in Mumbai in India, and he came up with the story, and him and I co-wrote the story. And then when we started casting, none of the Tamil actors wanted to do it. Because, dressing like a woman, kissing another man, all these things. So I had to go and find a Punjabi actor who's also brown, but, and then movie, we wrote the script in 2004, and then 2016 we shot the film, and then 2018, because of the financial issues and all that, it took a long time to come out. When the movie came out, Fantastic Woman was out, it got the foreign language in Oscars, so the trans narrative is the biggest thing. And then I was under the, I was under hot water for casting a Punjabi guy, straight guy, for a trans role. And uh, but at the end, after my movie right now, about 20 open trans people, the first person, she called out and said, after Roobha, I'm coming out. So the movie has done wonders, but still, Canadian Tamil Queer Association, they don't endorse my film. They think a bunch of straight guys. But we had trans people giving us consulting and all that. So going back to Kyle's point, where do we stop it, right? These gatekeepers, like I'm a victim of this authenticity and representation and stereotyping, but where do we go? And if I hadn't found the Punjabi actor, movie wouldn't have happened, because I know all the Tamil actors in Canada. I reached out to them, good ones. I'm not going to put a bad actor in an acting position and then lose the whole thing. So that's the question I wanted to ask. Like, there are two rhetoric around this, right? Like, is it I'm from this community, so I'm the only one who has to tell these things, or I'm in a different community, but I truly feel, and then I'm in a position because I had done 2 films, and then I'm in a position to make this film in my community, and how do you do it, right? Like Karl Marx, it's from bourgeois family, but he wrote Communist Manifesto, right? And Hotel Rwanda, it's from Northern Ireland director Terry George's film. It's a beautiful film, right? So are we getting carried away? Because I'm saying I want to explain. So the gatekeepers are we going into the extreme side, right? Do we, like, if a person honestly and genuinely coming into a community and then he has the ability to take it out, then shouldn't we allow him, right? Where do we stop? So that's a question I wanted to throw.
I think we're there. I think we're in that time right now where I think our ideas are changing, because we are seeing that. Where do we draw that line on? Are there no non-native filmmakers allowed to tell a native story? Well, if it's done properly. Like, I just finished a film by a East Indian director out west and we had a wonderful cast. We had Adam Beach, myself, Graham Greene, Nathaniel Arcan, Simon Baker, Carmen Moore, like Tanea Beatty. We had a powerful cast of actors, right? And it's this guy from Fort Mac. He was up there working in Fort Mac in the oil companies for years, and he came in and he told this First Nations story, but it's because he spent a lot of time. This is why we all agreed to do it, because he spent time with the people in the community that were affected by industry, and he put that into a film, and he wanted to tell it from an honest perspective. Now an interesting thing that happened in this is that he came from a Bollywood background, right? So he wanted us to do all these dances and stuff in our film. And he comes into our trailers one day and he says, "So Glenn, wouldn't there be people dancing and everything when the chief comes out? Because we're happy to see him. He's not dead." And I was like, no, there wouldn't. No. He goes, "Well, I got a Métis dancer who's going to jig, and I figured somebody else can do this and somebody else." No, that wouldn't happen. I said, if anything, there might be an individual there with a drum singing a song for the chief, as he comes out. We're going to honor him with a song. And he's like, but he kept pushing the dancing thing, right? And all of us are like, did he talk to you about the dancing thing? Yeah. I think I got it. I think I got through to him. So, but he respected that. Like, he came up to us instead of going, "You know what? No, I'm not going to talk to these guys, and I'm just going to get them to do it, because I'm the director." And then they say, do everything the director's way, right? I'm one of those actors that likes to challenge directors, just for fun, But so I don't know. Do you guys have anything about that? Because I think that's where we're at right now in this time. Yeah. And I think the last couple of years have given us time to reflect on that too. I mean, because all the media stuff came out in Canada about, we'll say, authenticity, for instance. And I think we've had time to absorb it, sit back and think about it, process it, and go, okay, now where are we at? And now where are we going from here? And how do we go there? As, like, if I want to tell a story I'm a native filmmaker from a native background, but what if I want to tell a story that's not native? You know? What if I want to write a story about Cape Bretoners? I'm a Cape Bretoner. I can tell an honest story about Cape Bretoners. I grew up, you know, in a Cape Breton community, and I know how rugged and rough and tough it can be, and all the dysfunction. Cape Breton's very dysfunctional. I love it, but it is very dysfunctional. So, you know, I think that's where we're at this time and where we're in this day and age, which is interesting. So let's move down the line, because we're gonna get back to the second question, which is, what are the ways in which you went about trying to make your film authentic? And I think you guys can speak together on this.
Yeah, we'll just riff. We'll go back and forth like jazz. So, for this this particular short film, it's a longer story than just a short film, of course, because the short film is something that we did in efforts to try and further a feature film project that the short is based on. Okay, we all know how that goes. So it didn't start with thinking about the story of the short film. It started 3-something years ago with the story of the feature film. And the story of the feature film was an idea that came to me, because I'm also the writer for that, when we did a different initiative that involved film training, skills, practices, and thinking about decolonizing storytelling with a professor friend of ours and a group of young indigenous filmmakers in San Diego, hosted by the University of California, San Diego campus, right? So like it's following all the breadcrumbs here. What's the question again?
Is what are the ways in which you went about trying to make your film authentic?
Right. So it's going all the way to the very beginning of a relationship, right? Because the idea started with the story. Okay, you know, the story came from my imagination largely, based on what I figured was something that were experiences of people in real life, right? It's about a black person who finds out they have indigenous ancestry, right? And going to reacquaint themselves with that part of their family that they didn't know existed, and understanding how it now meshes with their established identity as a black person, right? So there are lots of black Native people, lots and lots. And there are even more people in the world who have more than one identity, right? So it's a story that a lot of people can resonate with, I think, right? So, okay, the story comes from the imagination, but how are we ever going to make a story like this if I can only really see half of that perspective, right? We need to collaborate with somebody in a very deep way who can be that other half, right? So after the story was a little bit more concrete and some things were written down, we reached out to all of our friends to see who could be this indigenous co-director, co-writer, right? Even that had a process, because it wasn't just about finding an indigenous person to check the box. The main character of the story is female, so that was a priority too. Could we possibly find a female indigenous director, right? And so we got a list of names that people said, oh, check this person out. And of course we hadn't met any of them before. So my impulse was to look them up online, see what I could see. I'm so much about how people make me feel, right? So I looked up what I could online, and people had interviewed for different projects and things like that. And it didn't take me long to be like, I think this is the person. 24-year-old, just graduated from Ryerson, was already doing a number of things with Imaginative, with CBC, et cetera. So we met her, and we had an amazing conversation. And then we built that relationship for 3 years, right? Going back and forth on the story, working on things, tailoring the aspects of the story that had indigenous themes to her specific community, right? What her knowledge base is. And even, you know, during that sort of iterative process, just like this director, would they be dancing? I like the dancing. Would they be? No. Okay. You know? Because it's, you know, you have ideas, you have things, and you're trying to be creative. You're thinking, how could this go? We had ideas, and we were thinking even logistically, like, well, we're all based in Toronto. Your community's Eagle Lake, that's past Thunder Bay. But we're all based in Toronto, so what's a Native community around here maybe we could affiliate with? Six Nations, okay. And then we thought about that for a while. We kind of went with that, and we're like, you know what? No, it doesn't make sense to take your experience, your community, and then just put it in Six Nations.
Two different cultures.
Two different cultures. So we're like, okay, well, then let's do it up in the north. And then we go up to the north. We meet people like Sivam. We try to, you know, we're building relationships all along. How do you do things? What do you do? How can that be part of what we do? How does that change what we were originally thinking, right? Because approaching it with humility and detachment is so important when especially when you're working with a community that isn't yours, right? If it was just a story about myself, then I don't have to be that humble, I guess. Yeah. It's my story, right?
But following, you know, finding out what the cultural protocols and everything like that are, that's important too. That's another thing, is having consultants, cultural consultants on our films as BIPOC, you know, film community members and people making films. Is that I think is really important. Even me, if I want to tell a Mi'kmaq story, I'm going to see if I can have a Mi'kmaq consultant on it, especially if it's going to involve something when it comes to the culture. So that's another important thing for us, I think, because sometimes even as creatives, say as a writer or a director, you might be aware of all that, but something might slip because you got so much other stuff on your mind, and you're like, oh shit, how did I let that slip? You know, so you know, hand it over to somebody else.
Yeah, and hopefully not even just one other voice, right? Because I think, you know, when we're doing applications, when we're filling out forms, all of this, these are check boxes now, right? Did you consult with somebody from the community? Or we have a 5-minute conversation. Some people might count that as a consultation with somebody from the community, right? But like I said before, also individuals, even if they're from one community, have different perspectives. You know, you make this film about transgender, it's super helpful and supportive in the eyes of some transgender people from Sri Lanka. And for others, it wasn't, right? And so even talking to more than one person from this community to get the general sense, okay, we're not just doing things that are that particular person's opinion about how it should go. Because like I said before, like not all of us, rarely any of us, are really that truly authentic within ourselves too, right? Anyway, what do you want to add?
No, I'm still thinking about your question of like, do we get to tell someone else's story? And I think that we are a humanity that's grappling with our oneness, and it is every day and every year we're exploring our oneness in different ways, and there's questions of allyship, and like in our film, we're not from that indigenous community, but we have been working with we've become friends really, and we've created these beautiful relationships over the last 3 years. And it takes time. I always say, like, you gotta take the time and also be detached. Like, you might not be welcome there, or someone might say, no, we actually don't want, you know. So it's things that you have to be open, again, humble and detached about as things move organically. I had one example, but I forgot. So I forgot.
Well, it's interesting too, like we were saying earlier about you're getting flack from 2 different communities about your film, you know, and I can relate with that as well. I mean, I did a film a few years ago, which was an LGBTQ action thriller, and I got, you know, the director was a two-spirited filmmaker, native from Nova Scotia, and he couldn't find any two-spirited male actors who were, I don't know, could take on the physicality of these roles. And, my character was supposed to be a bit older and coming from New York with $6 million cash and getting chased by New York bad cops and whatever. And so I expected that I would get flack from the two-spirited community, from the LGBT community, because I'm straight and playing a gay man. And I didn't, though. I was ready for it. I was ready for it. I said, oh, geez, I'm going to do this film. And I said, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be a great film. And my buddy's going to play my boyfriend, and we're going to make out in this film. And I had no problem with that, because because I look at it like I'm comfortable with my sexuality. I know who I am, and I know what I like. So I didn't feel threatened in any way by portraying this character or kissing another man on the lips. It didn't bother me, My cohort had a little harder time with it. I was like, come on, what are you doing, man? Kiss me.
Was it the goatee?
It might have been the goatee. Might have been, yeah. It might have been. But yeah, so I mean, that's, and it was like you're saying, where do we draw that line? I play Cree, Ojibwe, Mohawk, Mi'kmaq, Sioux, Cherokee. I play all these characters, and this is where, like you're saying, casting a Punjabi actor to play that role. Well, if nobody else was going to do it from that actual community, then what are you going to do? You could hire a shitty actor to play that role who's going to ruin your film, or you go and you find somebody who's really good and can sell it and is going to be there and give the best performance ever, So, yeah, where's the line? 10? Okay.
I think that, can I just add, I think that one day, hopefully, this isn't that much of an issue, right? In the same way that, we don't complain that somebody from Chicago plays somebody from New York, right? It's a very serious and important thing now because of the historical lack, right? But as we move forward into a place where the barriers are less, the opportunities are more, the stories are diverse, maybe it becomes less of, because I'm sure you don't approach these other roles from different indigenous communities in any way other than, let me try to portray this as best I can, right? Yeah. And so...
And it really boils down in the end to respect, right? I'm going to respect that culture that I'm representing. We did Outlander, I'm playing Cherokee. I'm going to respect that culture, the Cherokee culture. I'm going to talk to somebody maybe that's Cherokee that I know and say, hey man, am I saying these words right? They gave them to me and they gave me recordings, but I don't have somebody here coaching me. So FaceTime somebody. Hey bro, how you doing? I need to know if I'm saying this stuff right. So it's like, there's a bit of that, But I think, in the end, respect is a big thing. And if the respect is there, then all the other pieces will fall in place the way that they're supposed to, in a good way, so that us as storytellers don't hurt anybody or offend or misrepresent, and so, and in the end, it just boils down to respect. I think I don't know if you guys, yeah, you guys all seem to be agreeing.
No, exactly that is right. So we are all artists at the end of the day, and I think it's how important these gatekeepers are outside, but it's also our personal responsibility to be honest and truthful. And ignorance is the bad thing here, right? So it's so easy to get carried away with an idea and then creative aspect, and then if you don't do the due diligence, and then if we have to conquer our ignorance, and then be truthful to the content, and then be bold, and then be who you are. You are an artist at the end of the day, and then it's your responsibility. And then exactly as you said, it's the respect and how you are taking it personally, because no matter, you can't please the world at the end of the day. No matter how you do it's not going to work for everyone. And there's a point there that as an artist you have to call the shot, whether you want to go forward or not. and you have to conquer your ignorance, because that's why you need the due diligence and the consultant, as you said.
Right, yeah. You know, another interesting thing is when it comes to authentic storytelling too, is like, oh yeah, I have a film I'm producing and directing next year, my first feature. And it went through so many phases of development, you know, of the script over the years. And I had some really hardcore stuff in there that was based on my own real experiences in life, you know, like violent things that happened, different crazy, and I got told to take them out of my script. Yeah, you know, we really like your story and everything, but yeah, there's a little, that one scene where you have, it starts out with sex and then turns violent. Can you remove that from your script? And I was like, wow, I don't know, that's my opening scene. It's the attention getter. You know, that's gonna grab everybody. Everybody loves sex, everybody loves violence in film. And if you wanna grab somebody's attention, why not open it with that, you know? But, you know, and then I had another, an older Native couple in my story that could drink anybody under the table. And they were a fun couple. And I got told I needed to take those out of because I was presenting a stereotype. And in my mind I'm going, well, no, because these two characters are actually based on two real people on a real experience that I had. And I wanted to put that in a story to say that not every Native elder in a movie is the spiritual elder that's gonna brush you off with eagle feathers and, you know, smudge you, you know? So it's like a cohort of mine said, you know, another filmmaker, he said, it's not all about drums and feathers, you know, or drums and buckskins or feathers and buckskins all the time, you know? And so where do we draw that line, you know, as want to tell a story from an authentic place. So in my film, I don't really have anything spiritual, like cultural stuff. This is just a contemporary story about this kid and his uncle who go through a crazy little road trip, you know, and all kinds of crazy stuff happens to them. You know, there's sex, there's violence, there's, you know, it's intense, it's, you know, and then, you know, another friend of mine is doing a movie right now in California, the first indigenous heist movie. So he wrote a film about some Native guys that are doing a heist. Oh, somebody might tell him, oh, I don't like the way you're representing our people. That's not right. You're making us look bad. Well, no, when can we start writing fictional stories ourselves? You know, of guys doing heists, guys doing bank robberies, or, you know, group of guys living in New York City, they're all Native guys doing something. They're up to something now. They got their own little mob going. Hey, there you go. Native mob in New York. There we go, next movie. So, okay, we got a few more minutes left here. So, what are some of the gaps or challenges, you know, to ensuring authentic and inclusive storytelling in the Canadian film industry? And what are some ways the Canadian film industry can further support authentic storytelling? So, anybody want to take it away, start it off?
I think I always, something that's really been in my mind is access to funding, because the way that I've observed, like, I'm an immigrant, and what I've learned is that there is a system that has been in place and has favored certain people for a long time. And you know, maybe you get similar people getting the same funding, and I'm not saying that their stories are not authentic, but if we want to be authentic to Canada and to the diversity of Canada, then we need to give space for more voices to speak to all of these different authentic experiences of all nations, coming from immigrants or living here or indigenous communities. And I think the one, you said, what's the barrier, right?
Yeah, what are some of the gaps
Like,
or challenges, you know, in
just
ensuring
from my experience, is what I've seen is a lot of people who are wanting to tell stories and don't even find the application and funding model and system to be a big barrier. And I'm just thinking of emerging and people, but when I say emerging, I don't mean necessarily young in age, because there are all sort of ages in the emerging category, right? There's mothers who had started their career in their 40s and 50s, you know. So just that's just one little. It's a very practical thing, but it's a small thing. But I think it's big because it stops people from applying to these funds so that they can tell their stories. Like there's this very bureaucratic system, which I understand why it needs to be there, and I understand why these applications are needed. But so, like, one of the ways that we've tried to tackle that is working with these emerging filmmakers of all ages and really sitting with them and saying, okay, we figured out these portals, we figured out these applications, we figured out how to write this language. I'm gonna sit with you for 2 hours, and I'm gonna like teach you how to do this. And I think that we need to. There's this notion of like you have to pay your dues, you gotta suffer in order to make your stuff, and there's like this. What I've observed sometimes that there's a secrecy around how you get things made, and I think that we need to. Producers, we need to just be more transparent and generous with knowledge and information, and just say like, I learned this is how I funded my film. And you should know, too, how you do to fund your film, because I want you to tell your story. I'm not the only one that needs to tell a story.
I'm going to add this question in on the top of this one. So what are the roles and responsibilities of the funding organizations?
Well,
you know, the institutions, you know.
I think it's improved in the last 2 years especially. There's better guidelines. It's as simple as providing an easy application portal. where
User-friendly?
We've had in our indigenous cohort right now, because we gave them funding to write their screenplays, and now are accompanying them so that they can write so that they can apply for development funds. And it's just like a simple portal where someone, because they look at it and they say, I can't do this, I don't have this, I don't have that, and then they stop. And what does that mean? You're stopping an entire generation of people, or a whole person's career, because they don't know how to, do this administrative stuff. Or
they're intimidated by, right.
That's just a small gap. That's kind of bothering me these days.
Yeah. So
We got
that,
like 5 minutes, so.
okay. That for sure. I think in a more macro way, maybe one of the challenges is the way that our industry even views success. Because let's be honest, the film industry in Canada doesn't compete with the film industry in the US in terms of how it translates into profit. I mean, we just don't have the population size. We don't have the amount of dollars. We don't have the studios with the power to that scale, right? And so, but I think that, we still hope that you make a film in Canada, a Canadian feature, somehow it's going to make $100 million. Like, that's not, has that ever happened,
It's kind of a dream. I mean,
it's kind of a dream.
Us,
Therefore, like, why are we looking at things in that way, right? Why don't we look at things in a slightly different way? Not saying that I have a suggestion for how it should be, but it seems like when we're telling these stories from an authentic place, from an underrepresented community, the scale is different.
Yeah.
The objectives are different. Therefore, what we view as successful with those projects, those endeavors, is also different, right? Like, for some people, to tell their own story is the success.
Yeah.
Let me tell a story here, show it to these people here.
Right.
That's dream accomplished, right? And so funders, organizations, studios, they don't always see that as important, right? But I think it's because where we're looking and what is success to us isn't the full picture.
Right. See, I'm just going to add something to this. I'm not going to talk too much because we got somebody here waiting to say something or ask a question. But, personally, I think the role and responsibility of the funding organizations, and I can only speak in regards to being an indigenous filmmaker or creative person, is the self-identifying checkbox needs to be removed, I think. That's one of the big things for my community, is that needs to be removed, because anybody can come in and say, I self-identify as Ojibwe or whatever. And then you end up with these controversial things happening that, hurt people all around, So do we have something from the floor here? We got maybe 2 minutes? 2 minutes?
Thank you very much. I'm from Timmins, Ontario. I do the film portfolio in Timmins. So one of the things we had a large discussion about yesterday at lunch, which was a bunch of all the communities from Sion, was the authenticity stories that are being told about our community and people coming to the community. It's one thing to use the community, you're using it for backdrops, you're using it for locations, but when they're actually telling the story of the community and they're not from the community, we are a mining town, we're very conscious of that, and a few years ago we did have someone come in, not from the community, did not respect and talk to people from the community, and did put something on the air that was really a documentary that was quite hurtful. And we had that discussion yesterday because some of us are in that same position again. And where does the city, when you're telling a story, the authenticity of the city, there is a line there. Like I said, it's one thing to using us for locations, but when you're telling the story and you're really identifying the city at some point, the people want to know, the community wants to know. And where does that conversation come in?
Yeah, and as you need to step in as the consultants for the city, if somebody's going to come in and say, you're telling a story about us, you need to talk to us.
Yeah, and that was actually it, and some of the legalities of how we can be sure that we are represented, at least in a fair position, at least to respect some of the positions that there, if it's the whole story. It's hard to tell the whole story when you don't talk to anybody, so.
Okay, we got 1 minute to wrap it up.
I have another one.
Okay. No?
You want to cut it? Okay.
Yeah.
Can I still ask the question, or do we have to let the
That's
other,
it.
you
Sorry.
ready for cut off?
We can talk afterwards
Yeah, that's
outside or
what I meant.
whatever.
Okay.
But okay, thank you everybody for joining us today. And that was this panel discussion on authentic narratives. And I think it was a pretty interesting conversation. Thank you all for opening up and speaking truthfully and honestly and authentically. Okay, have a good day, everybody. Thank you for joining us online, everybody, and have a good one.